All right. So I'm with Stephen Tobolowsky, one of my favorite actors and favorite people on the planet. And Stephen not only has been a repeat guest of Radio Titans on its shows, but also you were on Grand Theft Audio and on Grown Ass Men. But also, you very amazingly agreed to guest star in my sitcom pilot that was notoriously shot from scratch three different times with three different scripts over 3 different years. And you're famously from Groundhog Day, as I always like to point out. But you wound up turning into almost a real life Groundhog Day situation because you were you were reshooting with us over and over and over. And so anyway, so I want to ask you a few things about that today. So first of all, I remember meeting you because I went to a performing magazine actors workshop day, and you were given a talk. And one thing, I think I'll take a chance to just admit the truth about something. There was two talks going on at the same time that I was dying to see. I wanted to see you, but I also I forget what the other talk is now, showing how important it really was, I guess. But it was something that was very, very specifically, oh my God, this is advice I need immediately for what I was doing at the time. It may have been something about comedy performance or whatever. And so I just sat near the door of that room, and about 5 minutes before the session ends, because we weren't supposed to jump room to room or whatever, I just jumped up and I ran out of the room with the guy going, "Hey," and I ran over to where your room was, and I waited till everybody started walking out, and I walked in, and I was like, "Mr. Tobolowsky, that was awesome." But but the thing was,
You were
I
lying.
wanted to do really badly, but it was seriously, it was just that the other advice was something I absolutely had to have that moment.
And
And so anyway, so
have you used that other advice?
probably not.
Probably not. Right.
Yeah.
See, you should have
But
been in
anyway,
my room from the first place.
I know I should have. So anyway, so you kindly agreed to come on as a podcast guest. This is like 2012, probably, or maybe even earlier. And so, what I mean, were you open always to doing any sort of podcast, or was there something about me that made you decide I'll give this guy a chance?
Yeah, it wasn't that you were just a liar, when we first met. Uh, and I don't even remember that particular event. I think the only reason I really went on your podcast was I read something you wrote
Oh,
in the Pasadena paper.
yeah, well, Pasadena Weekly. Yeah.
Yeah, I read something you wrote, and I thought it was so well written, and I
Oh.
thought it was yeah. There you go. So there's a stroke for a cause. So I thought it was so well written. I had a feeling, incorrectly as it turned out, that the radio interview with the Titans would be equally as formulaic and clear and concise. Whereas, so I was very willing to meet you in that situation, and that's how I
Okay.
jumped in.
All right. So, what did you think of? Because you were a repeat guest, and you always like. I was always obsessed with Ned Ryerson, which we'll get to still in a moment. But even though you've done like 200 other parts, which is a running joke in the sitcom, always that you're always pointing out, like I've done 200 other roles, Carl. And yet I'm harping on the one thing from when much early in your career where you basically say the same line a few times over. But what did you think of the experience once you're actually doing what did you think of us as a podcast with Grand Theft Audio?
Terrifying. It
Really?
was terrifying. It was all terrifying. It was a terrifying experience. Where you recorded was terrifying in Hollywood, terrifying. It was in the scariest parts of downtown Los Angeles, terrifying. And the sitcom experience, your apartment, terrifying. I mean, the only part of it that wasn't terrifying was, I always loved going to the Ice House, where all the comics were,
Yeah.
in Pasadena, right? That was in Pasadena, right?
Yes.
Do I have that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to go there to see all of my friends who were young comics starting out. They got their first shot at the Ice House, and for years, I would just drive over there to watch their performances. And so when I was in your fantasy of fantasies, I'm like a headliner or something at the Ice House. I've never done stand up in my life. I never will do stand up in my life. But somehow in your script, I turned out to be that one of the beginnings of my comic instincts were that I was a stand-up comic, and so I got to pretend I was performing at the Ice House. And of course, you had a audience of extras. Now, I see why you get me to be in it because I had a part. But how you got these other people to be in it with no parts, I have no idea. So anyway, you had these shills in the Ice House, and I got to come out and make up some stuff that was supposed to be comedy, and they were all pretending to laugh. So I was able to live that fantasy for one little moment that I was somehow a successful stand-up comic.
Wow. Okay. So, so as far as the downtown, okay, so Hollywood was the first place, and just to see if this sparks any further thoughts about how terrifying the place was. Hollywood, we were at Hollywood in Cahuenga. We were in a building that it turned out the management company didn't even know was being used. And it was, which is a whole crazy other story. But the thing was, in that building, a gang had taken over the basement, was making possibly drugs there, definitely dealing from there. There were often homeless people asleep on the staircase. There was a methadone clinic down the hall, which the management company didn't know about either. It was just, they claimed to know that nobody claimed that they didn't know anybody was in the building legally. But there was a full-on homeless shelter, homeless program with methadone down the hall from us. And above us was illegal gambling operation that the cops raided multiple times on weekends. And in the middle of it all, we had this studio with two little rooms and a door that had no doorknob and a crack in the glass. And so it wasn't perfectly soundproofed. And it just was this incredibly bizarre operation. But we managed to, it was supposedly Doris Day's former office from decades before. And now, ironically, I've fallen in love with Doris Day and I watch all her movies on TCM. But anyways, it just was this bizarre panoply of perversion, I guess is a good way to put it. Any further
It's
thoughts
generous.
about that?
It's generous of you to call it bizarre. You know, it's like as an actor or whatever, you know, we assume we're going to go to an interview that's in like some place that belongs at that point in the 20th century. And every place I was interviewed by you or performed by you was like a scene from I Am Legend. You know, that everywhere you go, you know, you're in these sheltered buildings with broken glass. People had shotguns, and everywhere around us were vampires that were going to like tear us to pieces. And not soundproof. I mean, there was nothing soundproof about this stage. There was nothing where we recorded ever. Nothing ever was soundproof. Nothing ever was. It just amazed me that you had enough professional equipment to actually record something and put it on the air.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that we always had construction noise going on in the Hollywood location. And I remember one time, I don't know why she won't agree to be interviewed, because she was a dear celebrity friend like yourself. Tracy Newman, comedy writer who created According to Jim, the Jim Belushi show, she came in as a guest one time, and she's playing a song on a ukulele, like a beautiful little ditty that she'd written herself. And she's sitting in this high back chair, and all of a sudden, in the middle of her song, you hear this drill going, and it sounded like it was about to come through the wall and go bore through the back of her chair and her head. And she just flips out and was like, oh my God, what is that? And I was like, oh, that's just the construction crew. They're actually downstairs. It just sounds like. And she's like, how can you take this so calmly? And she sat back down and she finished the interview amazingly. But it's one of my favorite moments. And imagine she doesn't want to talk about it a decade later. But yeah, so we had some interesting times there.
Now, I you know, I did not know the squalid conditions that we would be recording in, the horror of it all. But as you brought up the first lie in which you met me is that you pretended you were at this whatever I was speaking at, because I speak of various things. One reason why actors will say yes to this experience is kind of for the same reason. Is a lot of times we work out what we're thinking if we're writers or if we're speakers. We work out what we're thinking in this kind of laboratory where I have a microphone now in front of me and I have this windscreen in front of me and I'm talking to you about a specific subject. And it's I guess it's aerobics for speakers to appear, and you never know. You never know who's going to hear what from what, who's going to hear Radio Titans. And it could be somebody who quite accidentally are driving across the Nevada desert and the station they were listening to goes out and suddenly they start hearing 10-year-old things that were caught in the ionosphere of Radio Titans, and they hear some sort of show or some sort of story that excites them or turns them on. You never know what connects to what on Earth. You never know. So it always behooves an actor or a writer to get the opportunity to speak in a situation like that, which was my buy-in.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So then downtown, I'm surprised you found that scary. I think maybe you're forgetting that was actually a pretty cool place. We were in Macy's Tower, Macy's Plaza in a skyscraper called The Block. I can't remember if you did that era. You probably did.
I did it downtown, but the building seemed deserted. I mean, you could call it Macy's Tower, but it seemed like the floor didn't have any electricity on it. I remember I got there a little early, and they had a light bulb in the hallway, but you guys were recording somebody else at the time, and they said, could you just wait in the hallway? So I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone while you were finishing in Macy's Tower. I mean, you made it sound like we were in Chicago's Gold Row or something. It
really was a nice place. There were two different places we were downtown. There was one briefly called Skid Row Studios, aptly enough. That was a dive. Maybe we had you on that and not.
Maybe you had me in Skid Row Studios. That sounds like it could have been it. Yeah. It was over on I thought it was like on Main or Fifth.
Okay, that was the other one. The nicer one that I'm shocked if I never had you in it. We were a year and a half. It was at 7th and Hope at Macy's Plaza, right near 7th and Fig.
No.
Oh, really? Wow.
So I think I was on the Main Street one, which I knew Main Street in Los Angeles.
Not good.
It's not good. If people are hearing this from different places around the country, usually think of Main Street as like the really happening place. Like in Dallas, Texas, Main Street is the happening place. But in Los Angeles, Main Street is terror. Main Street is Skid Row. Main Street is...
Hang on, Stephen. Sorry, I had to pause it briefly because I wanted to keep it tight and professional while I get interrupted.
Okay. If I could give you some advice,
sure.
In the professional end of things,
then
wear pants.
Oh, sure.
When you're recording, when you're interviewing people, even if it's just for fun, wear pants. If you are being filmed, at some point, someone like me, the person you're interviewing, will accidentally see that you are not wearing pants.
Well,
don't assume you're going to be seated the entire time.
They're not boxers. They're
even
shorts.
Worse. It's
really?
even worse.
Okay.
I would have preferred boxers.
Put the boxers on.
I would have preferred boxers
Okay.
with puppy dog. No. Stop it. We're recording this very early in the morning. I haven't had breakfast. I've had a cinnamon roll and 2 cups of coffee now. And I wish I could unsee what I have seen.
Wow. All right. So anyway, let's get back to imagine. So I had you go to three horrific locations, and then the one classy joint we had, I leave you off the list for a year and a half.
Yeah,
Imagine.
I'm still stewing over that. Plus the fact how you lied the first time you saw me. This is causing deep internal scars.
Okay, so anyways, then we wound up doing it in my apartment, the shows, and that was the Gaylord apartment. So the lobby, everybody talks about how the lobby was great because it's palatial for an apartment building. It used to be a classy hotel until like I don't know, way back when.
Yeah.
And then you wind up going upstairs, and it's like this hallway from The Shining. And then you go into my apartment, and the studio is in a studio apartment, so that like the table's 10 feet away or less from my bed, which probably caused all sorts of Me Too trauma for women as they walked in the room wondering what's going to happen. So any thoughts about that you can go further with?
Nightmare. You know, in Scrabble,
Wow.
in Scrabble, I would have spent all my letters on that, and I have to link in. But anything connected with you is going to have nightmare somewhere in the title. It's like that apartment. That apartment had stuff wrapped up in stuff behind stuff that had been forgotten and left there years ago. The whole place was a trash trove, not a treasure trove, a trash trove. You had trash behind trash within trash. And then in the middle of that, you had what you call a studio, which was like a table. That's the studio. You had a table with some electronic equipment on it. And we all had
tables.
Huh?
Studios have tables.
Yeah, but not like the bedroom and a kitchen. I mean,
Yeah.
And a bathroom. I mean, it was a very small area.
Yeah.
And you wanted to make sure you kept all your personal belongings very close, or you would never find it in that place. You would never find it.
Okay. Well, all right. So now let's get on to the even more traumatic experience of doing my sitcom.
Oh God.
So I don't know how I decided that I would pick you to be the guest star.
Everybody else said no, and what you said that you wanted to interview, the celebrities that came on your show, for this Netflix thing, and I was the 42nd person you've interviewed.
No,
so,
I scheduled this a long time ago, and you put me off till now. I scheduled.
I see.
You were in the top 10 or so that I first called.
That's good. So anyway, the sitcom. The problem with the sitcom is it just never ended, and we shot it there, and you kept changing directors, and each director came with the thing. Well, this person really knows what they're doing. And then you go, okay, well, now this time, this person really knows what they're doing. Well, this time, this person really knows what they're doing. And I'm going like, okay. But I just, in a way, it kind of was masochism on my part, bordering on true desire to see where we're going to end up on this trail. And for me, it was sort of exciting to end up at the ice house. And I thought it was over at that point, but I think it wasn't over at that point. I think we still
the ice house in two different scripts. I don't think the second one involved the ice house, but the first and third versions did. Yes.
Yes, and we kept. It was the dream, Kaz. It was the dream. I saw that you were embracing this dream so fully. And I'll tell you, I was so happy. You did a one-man show in Hollywood about, your sleeping narcolepsy, your sleeping disorder, which I thought was remarkable. Remarkable. And you thought it was hilarious. You thought your stories were hilarious, and I thought it was one of the scariest shows I ever saw. Now, that isn't to say, now I want to, and I think we had this, you were a little concerned at the end of the show that I was saying like I was dissing the show. I thought the show was fantastic. And I
Wow.
thought your stories were fantastic, but they were not funny. I mean, you thought they were
Well,
funny
the
because
audience, most of the audience was laughing, though. I'm not being defensive. You have your right to your
no, no, no,
interpretation.
no, no, yeah, yeah.
Please
But
acknowledge there was huge laughs.
yeah, but I was hearing these stories as a person who I was embracing your horror. I was not in a place where I could distance myself from the horror and laugh. I mean, you could say like you survived those stories, but those stories were hair raising, and driving and then suddenly falling asleep, or your car's on the road, and I mean, each story was terrifying to me, but I thought it was amazing you telling those stories. I thought the show was mesmerizing. I thought it was terrific, but I didn't think it was funny. But I guess well, I mean, they were deadly events. I mean, they were
Yeah.
terrifying
Yeah.
events,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
you survived them. I mean, to me, it was be like someone telling stories about being in the gulag in Siberia and starving to death during the winters and being beaten by Russian guards, and now you're here, and people were laughing at and he was going to chop off my hand, but instead he just hit me in the head with the butt of a rifle. I mean, to me, that's kind of what the stories were like, and I thought it was an amazing show. I thought the stories
Wow.
were
Thank you.
amazing, but I remember it didn't tickle my funny bone. But that's just because you were very honest, very truthful about something that was very traumatic. You know.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, and with that, we conclude the traumatic interview. No. So, anyways, anything else that you want to say about your experiences, Radio
Yeah,
Titans, or
yeah,
any of
I
this?
do. I do.
Uh,
I really appreciate what you've done. And I really appreciate what you do because you you had nothing handed to you. You
yeah.
had nothing given to you. Uh, Everything was a struggle. Everything was a fight. You're a great writer and a terrific storyteller. And I even at that time, I appreciated the opportunities you gave me. I appreciated the interviews you gave me. And yeah, it was down and dirty, but I appreciate what you did. And good on you for that because, like I said, none of it was easy.
Yeah. Thank you. Hang on.